When Amale got engaged to Bekizitha, she thought she had finally found a man who would love her and her family equally. She had raised her younger brother Tariro, who had cerebral palsy, since they lost their parents in a fire. He couldn't speak, but his smile said it all. She was his whole world. But just weeks before the wedding, Bekizitha made one cruel demand. Your brother can't come. He'll ruin the photos. Torn between love and loyalty, Amale made a quiet choice that stunned the entire venue on the wedding day and changed her life forever. Amale was a gentle and kind schoolteacher who lived in Enugu. She spent most of her life caring for her younger brother, Tariro, who couldn't walk or speak because of his condition. After losing their parents in a fire many years ago, Amale became everything to Tariro, his sister, mother, and best friend. Even though life had been tough, Amale always smiled and stayed strong, especially for Tariro. One sunny afternoon, something surprising happened. Bekizitha, a charming and successful architect she had been dating, knelt down and asked her to marry him. Amale's heart raced. She looked around in shock, holding back tears. She couldn't believe that someone like Bekizitha, handsome and full of dreams, wanted to spend his life with her. Around them, people clapped and cheered as she said, yes. For the first time in a long while, Amale felt like her life was finally changing for the better. She thought about all the years of sacrifice, the nights she stayed up caring for Tariro, and the days she worked extra just to give him a good life. Maybe now, with Bekizitha by her side, things would be different. Maybe now, her little family would grow, filled with love, respect, and peace. Amale believed this proposal was not just about love, but about new beginnings. She imagined Tariro dressed in a nice suit, smiling proudly at her wedding. Even though Tariro couldn't talk, his eyes always spoke loudly when he was happy. She had already told him about Bekizitha, and though Tariro couldn't say it, he always smiled wider whenever she mentioned his name. To Amale, Bekizitha's proposal meant more than just getting married. It meant that her small, broken family would be whole again. She thought they would all be together, laughing, dancing, and making new memories. Her heart was full of hope. She didn't see any red flags. All she saw was a man who made her feel wanted, and a future that looked brighter than ever. Amale had no idea that this joyful moment would soon turn into heartbreak, but for now, she held onto the ring, hugged her brother tightly that night, and dreamed of walking down the aisle with her only family watching proudly. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. She believed she had finally found a man who loved her, and everything that came with her. At first, everything between Amale and Bekizitha seemed perfect. They smiled a lot, planned the wedding together, and Amale believed she had found someone who accepted her and her brother. But slowly, small comments began to change the way things felt. Bekizitha started saying little things that made Amale uncomfortable. He would sigh when she had to cancel a dinner because Tariro wasn't feeling well. He would roll his eyes when she spent extra time helping Tariro with his daily care. Why does everything always have to be about him? He asked one evening, trying to sound like he was joking, but Amale felt the sting in his words. The comments didn't stop there. One day Bekizitha said, I just think he's a bit too much sometimes. I know he's your brother, but can't you let someone else take care of him once? Amale looked at him, shocked. Tariro had no one else. She was all he had, and she had never once seen him as a burden. To her, caring for her brother was a part of who she was. She thought Bekizitha understood that, but now doubt crept in. Things got worse when Bekizitha's mother, Mazulu, came to visit. From the moment she arrived, she watched Tariro like he was something strange. She didn't smile at him, didn't speak to him. Later, when they were alone, she told Amale plainly, You're a beautiful girl. You have a good man, but you need to let go of this burden. That boy is holding you back. Amale's chest tightened. Did they really see Tariro that way? A burden? Amale tried to explain. She told Mazulu that Tariro was not a burden, that he was her family, and that she would never abandon him. But Mazulu just smiled and said, Marriage is about building a new family. You can't drag old problems into your new life. That word, problem, hurt more than Amale expected. She started feeling alone in the relationship. The man she loved, and the woman who would become her mother-in-law, didn't accept the most important person in her life. Still, Amale tried to stay strong. She told herself love requires understanding. She thought maybe, with time, Bekizitha would learn to love Tariro too. She kept hoping, kept believing. She reminded herself of the good moments, the laughter, the kisses, the dreams they had shared. But deep down, a quiet fear was growing. She was starting to see that the love she thought was so strong might not be deep enough to hold her whole truth. Amali didn't argue. She didn't fight. She kept smiling, but her heart was beginning to break in silence. She felt like she was standing between two worlds, one where she was loved as a woman, and another where she was needed as a sister. The real test of love was coming, and Amale had no idea how much it would hurt. One afternoon, just a month before the wedding, Amale and Bekizitha were going over the final wedding plans. Everything seemed normal until Bekizitha suddenly said, without looking up, "Amale, I've been thinking, maybe it's better if Tariro doesn't come to the wedding." Amale froze. At first, she thought she heard wrong. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, hoping she misunderstood. Bekizitha sighed and said, "It's just logistic. The venue isn't very accessible. The crowd will be large, and the day will be hectic. I don't want anything going wrong." But Amale knew. She knew it wasn't about logistics. It was about image. It was about embarrassment. He didn't want Tariro, her sweet, quiet brother who couldn't walk or talk, to be seen, to be in the pictures, to be part of their special day. Her heart cracked in a way she had never felt before. This was the same Tariro who had been there for every step of the wedding planning, the same boy who had clapped with joy when she showed him her engagement ring, the same brother who had smiled from ear to ear when she tried on her wedding dress, even trying to hold a pen with his shaky hand to scribble "Big Sister" on a little card he had made for her. He was more excited than anyone else. He had watched her spin around in her dress, his eyes shining with love. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. His joy was loud and clear. He had been part of every moment. Leaving him out now felt like cutting out her own heart. Amale looked at Bekizitha, searching for a sign that he didn't mean it, that he was just scared or stressed, but his face stayed serious, cold, final. He added, "I just think it's best for everyone." Tears welled up in Amale's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She nodded slowly, quietly, like she was agreeing. But inside, something changed. The man she thought she would build a future with just told her that her brother, her only family, wasn't good enough to be part of their big day. Amale felt alone, truly alone. She smiled on the outside, but her heart was breaking into pieces. She knew then that she had a choice to make. Not out loud, not in that moment, but deep inside, her mind was already working. Because if her brother couldn't be accepted in her new life, maybe it wasn't the life meant for her. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She simply said, "I understand." But her silence wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of something stronger, something bigger, something that would shake the whole wedding day. Amale sat quietly after Bekizitha told her Tariro couldn't come to the wedding. She didn't cry in front of him. She didn't shout or beg. She simply smiled a little and said, "Okay, I'll handle it." Bekizitha looked pleased, thinking she had chosen him over her brother. He believed the problem was solved, but inside, Amale was breaking. Her heart was heavy, and her soul felt tired, but she was not weak. She had made a choice, just not the one Bekizitha thought. From that moment, Amale started moving differently. She smiled more in front of him, acted like everything was fine. She agreed with his plans, nodded at his ideas, and let him believe she was happy. But when she was alone, her real work began. She started preparing something quietly, something powerful, something unforgettable. She reached out to a nurse who once cared for Tariro. She asked if she could help Tariro get ready for the big day. The nurse agreed with tears in her eyes. Amale spoke to a friend who worked with videos and asked him to create something special. A video that told her and Tariro's story. The nights were short and the days long, but she kept going. While others were choosing flowers and food, Amale was choosing something more important, truth. Every time she looked at her wedding dress, she remembered Tariro's happy face when she first wore it. Every time she held the invitation cards, she thought of how her brother tried to help fold them with his shaky hands. He wasn't just her family, he was her history, her reason, her home. Amale didn't tell anyone what she was planning, not even her best friend. She wanted everything to be a surprise, not because it was a trick, but because she wanted the truth to speak louder than any fight ever could. She wanted the world to see that love doesn't throw people away, especially not those who've given you everything. She practiced her speech at night when no one could hear her. She cried sometimes, wiped her tears, and kept going. She knew people would talk. Some might judge, but she didn't care. This was bigger than a wedding. It was about respect, about standing up for someone who couldn't speak for himself. And so, Amale kept her silence. But that silence was not weakness. It was strength. It was the calm before the storm, a storm that would not destroy, but open eyes. She smiled during rehearsals, posed for pictures, and said all the right things. But inside, she was holding a powerful truth, one that was going to change everything on the wedding day. The wedding day finally came. The venue was grand and beautiful, filled with white flowers, golden decoration, and the soft sound of music playing in the background. Guests began to arrive, all dressed in fine clothes, excited to witness the union of Amale and Bekezitha. Cameras flashed, heels clicked on the floor, and the hall filled with laughter and chatter. Bekezitha stood at the altar, looking proud and confident. He wore a sharp suit and kept smiling as people came to shake his hand. He glanced around the venue, taking in the beauty, the crowd, and the attention. To him, everything was perfect. He believed he had won. He thought he had gotten everything he wanted. A beautiful bride, a grand wedding, and no sign of Tariro. His mother, Mazulu, sat in the front row, her face full of pride. She leaned toward her son and whispered with a smile, "She chose wisely." She believed that Amale had finally let go of her brother, that she had picked her new life over her old one. To her, this was a victory, a fresh start without the burden of Tariro. But something didn't feel right. While Bekezitha's side of the venue was filled with family members, cousins, uncles, aunties, and old family friends, Amale's side looked almost empty. Just a few of her colleagues and close friends sat quietly, dressed neatly, but their faces looked unsure. Some whispered to each other. Some looked around, confused. There was no large family gathering for Amale. No aunts, no uncles, no cheerful relatives from her side. Just a small, silent group of people who truly cared about her. The empty chairs said more than words ever could. Bekezitha noticed, but he didn't care. He thought it made him look stronger, like the important one in the marriage. To him, it was fine if her side was small. What mattered was that Amale was about to walk down the aisle toward him, alone and quiet, just how he liked her. He didn't know what Amale had planned. He didn't see the quiet storm building in her heart. He didn't know that this wedding wasn't going to go the way he imagined. As he stood there, proud and smiling, the music changed, and everyone turned to see the bride. Amale was about to make her entrance, and with her something was coming that no one expected. A truth, a decision, a voice that had been silent for too long. The wedding had begun, but it was not the wedding Bekezitha thought it would. The music changed. It grew louder, sweeter, more emotional. Everyone stood up, expecting to see Amale walking in with her white dress and bright smile. Bekezitha stood taller, fixing his suit and smiling proudly, ready for his big moment. But then, something unexpected happened. It wasn't Amale who appeared first. From the back of the hall, a soft sound of wheels could be heard. Slowly the guests turned their heads, surprised and confused. A nurse gently pushed a wheelchair down the aisle, and sitting in that wheelchair was Tariro, Amale's brother. The room went completely silent. Tariro was dressed neatly in a light grey suit, with a small flower pinned to his chest. His eyes were full of light. Though he couldn't speak or move much, his presence said everything. He wasn't hidden. He wasn't left behind. He was here, at his sister's wedding, exactly where he belonged. People whispered. Some gasped. Mazulu's smile disappeared. Bekezitha's eyes widened in shock. He didn't expect this. He thought Amale had listened to him. He thought she had agreed to leave her brother out. But Amale had made her choice. As Tariro reached the middle of the aisle, a large screen behind the altar lit up. A video began to play. At first, it showed sweet, simple moments. Amale and Tariro as children, playing in the backyard, laughing, running. Then it showed Amale feeding Tariro when he fell sick, helping him at school, pushing his wheelchair under the rain with a big umbrella over his head. Tears filled the eyes of many guests. The music became soft and emotional. Then came the final clip. The screen went black for a moment. Then, a digital voice began to speak. It was slow and clear, a voice made by a machine, but full of heart. It said, "I love you, Amale." Everyone gasped again. Amale had taught Tariro how to use a voice synthesizer, and though it took weeks, he had recorded that message, just for her. Tariro's head turned slightly toward the screen, as if watching himself speak. And even though he didn't move much, there was a quiet smile on his face. It was his moment too. His sister hadn't left him behind. She had lifted him up, given him a voice, and made the world see him. The whole room was quiet, but hearts were loud, beating with emotion, with respect, with realization. This wedding wasn't about fancy decorations or what people thought. It was about love, true love, that doesn't throw away those who can't walk or speak. And for the first time, Bekezitha realized he had misunderstood everything. The hall was still quiet when Amale finally appeared, but she didn't walk in alone. She walked proudly, her hand resting gently on Tariro's shoulder as the nurse pushed him forward. Her white dress flowed beautifully behind her, but her face carried something even more powerful: strength, peace, and courage. People turned to look, many with tears already in their eyes. This was not the wedding they expected, but it was one they would never forget. Amale stepped up to the front beside her brother and faced the guests. She held the microphone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You all came here today expecting to see a wedding," she said. "But what you're going to witness instead is something more important: truth." The room stayed completely silent. Every eye was on her. She slowly turned to face Bekezitha, who was standing at the altar, confused and stiff. His smile had vanished long ago. Amale looked at him with calm sadness. "You told me my brother didn't belong," she said clearly. "You said he shouldn't be at our wedding. You called him a burden." Bekezitha shifted uncomfortably. He tried to speak, but Amale didn't let him. "If you can't love Tariro," she continued, her voice strong, "you can't love me, because he is a part of me. My family is not perfect, but it's mine, and I will never choose someone who makes me hide or feel ashamed of the people I love." There were gasps in the room. Even Mazulu looked shocked. Then Amale did something that made everyone freeze. She reached for her hand and slowly removed the engagement ring Bekezitha had given her. She held it up for a second, then placed it gently on the table in front of her. "This was supposed to be a symbol of love," she said softly. "But love without respect, love without acceptance, is not love at all." The ring sparkled under the lights, but it no longer had meaning. Amale turned to her brother and smiled. "You are my family, all of you. I will never leave you behind." Tariro looked up at her, his eyes full of love. Though he couldn't speak, everyone could see the connection between them, the real, unbreakable bond. Guests began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. Some stood, some wiped their tears. They weren't just watching a bride walk away from the wrong man. They were watching a woman choose herself, her truth, her family. Amale didn't look back as she turned away from the altar. She had walked in with her brother, and she would walk out with him too, together, always. Bekezitha stood frozen at the altar, his face pale and shocked. He didn't expect this. Not in front of everyone. Not today. As Amale turned to walk away with her brother, he suddenly rushed forward, trying to grab her hand. "Amale, wait, please," he said, his voice shaking. "We can talk about this. Don't do this. I didn't mean it like that." But Amale didn't stop. She didn't even look back. Her silence said everything. "I was under pressure," he continued desperately. "It was my mom. I didn't want to upset her. I do love you." But the words were too late and too empty. Some guests began standing up. A few shook their heads at him. Others whispered to one another. One woman walked up to Amale and hugged her tightly, then another and another. Soon, people began leaving their seats, walking out of the hall in support of Amale. The music stopped, but the message rang louder than any song. Mazulu, Bekezitha's mother, sat stiffly, her face full of shame. She had dressed like a queen for this day, hoping to show off her son's grand wedding. But now, everyone was watching her with disappointment in their eyes. "Let's go," someone whispered behind her, and even some of her own relatives stood up to leave. Flash after flash from phone cameras lit up the room. People recorded everything. Amale's speech, Bekezitha's begging, the guests walking out. Within minutes, the videos were already online. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, everyone was talking about it. A bride chooses love over pressure. A woman refuses to leave her disabled brother behind. Respect over romance. Amale walks away strong. Amale didn't say a word to Bekezitha. She didn't need to. The world was already saying everything for her. Bekezitha stood there alone, holding the ring in his hand, as the hall emptied around him. All his dreams of a picture-perfect wedding disappeared just like the guests, one by one. Mazulu tried to cover her face, but the cameras caught her too. Her words about Tariro being a burden were now being replayed online by guests who had overheard. The comments were harsh. Shame on the mother. She wanted the girl, not her story. And so, what started as a celebration turned into a powerful lesson about love, acceptance, and standing up for what matters. Amala didn't get married that day, but she gained something even more powerful: respect, freedom, and her voice. And the world cheered her on. Outside the wedding hall, the sun was shining, and the air felt light, like a heavy burden had just been lifted. Amale stepped out, holding her brother Tariro's hand tightly. The crowd that had walked out with her surrounded them with claps, cheers, and hugs. Some people Amale barely knew came up to her with tears in their eyes, saying, "You did the right thing, and you're so brave." Tariro, sitting in his wheelchair, looked up at her with the biggest smile. Even though he could not speak, his eyes were filled with pride and love. Amale bent down, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "It's just us now, but that's more than enough." One of her close friends took a photo of that moment. Amale holding her brother, both smiling. Within hours, it was all over social media. People from different parts of the country started sharing it, calling it the real love story. Others commented things like, "This is what family looks like," and "She chose truth over pressure." Not long after, Amale got a message in her inbox from a foundation that supports inclusive weddings. They had seen her story online and were moved to tears. They offered to sponsor a new celebration, one that honored her and her brother's bond, not just romantic love. They said, "We want to show the world that love comes in many forms." Amala was shocked. She never expected any of this, but she smiled and said yes. She didn't want a big wedding to prove anything anymore. What she wanted now was a day full of real smiles, real joy, and people who truly supported her. A few weeks later, the celebration took place in a beautiful open garden. It wasn't a wedding, but it was even better. There were colourful decorations, soft music playing, and tables filled with people who loved and respected her and Tariro. Instead of a wedding cake, they had a big cake that said, "Family is forever." Tariro was the star of the event. Everyone clapped when he rolled down the centre aisle, just like he did on what was supposed to be the wedding day. This time, there were no tears, only laughter, dancing, and happiness. Amal gave a short speech, thanking everyone and saying, "Today isn't about what I lost. It's about what I stood up for." This is the beginning of something beautiful. The videos and pictures from that day went even more viral. People around the world were inspired by her strength and love. Messages poured in from mothers, daughters, teachers, even celebrities. They all said the same thing: "Thank you for showing us that truth is worth celebrating." And in that moment, Amale knew she had chosen the right path, not just for her, but for her brother, and for every person who ever felt unseen. Amale sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, before she finally began typing. The words flowed naturally, each one carrying the weight of everything she had been through. She titled the blog, "My Brother Walked Me Down the Aisle, in His Own Way." As soon as she hit publish, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had shared her truth with the world. Within hours, the post went viral. People from all corners of the globe were sharing it, commenting, and applauding her courage. Amala had written with raw honesty, explaining how love and family meant more than anything society or a wedding could offer. She spoke about her brother, Tariro, the love they shared, and how he was always her real hero, even though the world didn't always see him that way. Soon, Amali was being invited to speak on talk shows, to appear on podcasts, and to advocate for families who had members with disabilities. She was no longer just a school teacher. She had become a powerful voice for inclusion, for love that didn't depend on conventional expectations. The media loved her story, her calm, quiet strength, and her unwavering commitment to what truly mattered. She became a symbol of courage, reminding people that family is about loyalty and acceptance, not appearances or superficial expectations. Amali's advocacy for disabled family inclusion gained momentum. She worked with several organizations that fought for equal rights and better representation for people with disabilities. She spoke passionately about the importance of embracing all family members, no matter their abilities or limitations. In her speeches, she often quoted her brother's simple words from the wedding video, "I love you, Amal." It became her mantra, a reminder that love, in its purest form, doesn't need validation from anyone. Meanwhile, Bekizitha, the man who had once promised to be her future, vanished from the public eye. His name slowly faded from media headlines, and his absence was barely noticed. People who had once admired him turned their attention to Amale, who had proven that true love wasn't about fitting into someone else's mold, but embracing the people who really mattered. Amale and Tariro, however, thrived in the spotlight of their own making. They built a new life for themselves, one filled with joy, acceptance, and pride. They attended events, traveled together, and spent their days making memories that mattered. Amale no longer felt the need to explain herself or apologize for her choices. She had learned that strength wasn't about being loud, it was about being unapologetically true to yourself. As the years went by, Amale and Tariro remained inseparable. Amale's career flourished, and she continued to use her platform to inspire others. Her message was simple: love is love, and it's worth fighting for, no matter what the world expects. In the end, Amale realized that the life she had built was far more beautiful and fulfilling than any wedding day could have ever been. She had found freedom in being herself, and that was all she had ever needed.